The most incriminating testimony came early this afternoon. Mary Lee Chilton, a former employee of the Guest House Inn, positively identified Clifford Henry Bowen as the man she saw hanging around the pool area the night of July 6th, just minutes before the shooting.
Did you look at him at that time?
Yes, I did.
Is there any question in your mind that this man seated right here is the one who was standing at that concession stand?
I have no doubt.
In cross-examination, defense attorney Raymond Berger asked Mrs. Chilton how she could make such a positive identification from a quick glance. Mrs. Chilton replied that that's part of her job, to remember people who are in the pool area that are not registered guests of the hotel.
Being registered at the motel, like he was waiting for someone or something.
Do you see that person in the courtroom?
Defense called its first witnesses early this afternoon. The owner of a Tyler, Texas rodeo arena testified that accused killer Clifford Henry Bowen was at the rodeo the night 3 men were shot to death at the Guest House Inn here in Oklahoma City. Johnny Wheeler testified that he saw Bowen in Tyler and spoke to him on the phone that Saturday night.
Called Henry and told him I couldn't come, I was too tired. And me and my wife got the stuff, put it in the car, and drove home, which is 4 miles from the arena.
Who answered the phone?
Henry.
Do you recognize Henry's voice?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
No question of mine. It was
No
Henry you
question
talked to
about
at
it.
1 o'clock.
Mm-hmm. It was 1 o'clock.
That would have been on the morning of July 6th.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Defense attorney Raymond Berger also called Bowen's 13-year-old stepdaughter Janine to the stand. She testified that she was with her father all night on July the 6th. Other witnesses from Tyler also told the jury that they saw accused killer Clifford Henry Bowen in Tyler Saturday night in question.
Did you have occasion to visit your mother and stepfather in July? Years old.
Accused hitman Clifford Henry Bowen took the stand in his own defense late this afternoon. He admitted he was a gambler and that he had been convicted of a felony years ago, but he testified he was not in Oklahoma City on the night of the murders.
City on July the 5th, 1980?
No, sir, I was not.
Where were you?
I was at a rodeo in Tyler, Texas.
That's the rodeo these witnesses have been testifying?
Yes, sir, it is.
Defense attorney Raymond Berger rested his case late this afternoon, and chances are the trial will go to jury by early tomorrow afternoon. Sue Lauer, Action 4 at the county courthouse. District Attorney Bob Macy called 6 rebuttal witnesses to the stand this morning. Macy is trying to show that a person could have traveled by plane from Tyler to Oklahoma City in less than an hour, but he did not show that Clifford Henry Bowen actually took that trip to Oklahoma City on July the 6th. Macy then called William Wayne Simmons to the stand. Simmons had been arrested earlier for the murders, but then released. Macy wanted to show that his witness could not have been mistaken when she positively identified Bowen, not Simmons, as the man she saw at the Guest House Inn on July the 6th. Testimony in the trial will continue through the afternoon. Reporting from the county courthouse, Sue Lauer, Action 4.
Approximately.
Closing arguments began just before 2 o'clock this afternoon. Defense attorney Raymond Berger contends that the state has not presented enough evidence to link accused hitman Clifford Henry Bowen to the murders at the Guest House Inn. He claims that the state has made a mistake.
I think the district attorney's made a mistake. His mistake can be corrected by this jury. I think the police department has made mistakes in this case, and theirs can be corrected by this jury. You make a mistake, there is no correction.
Then District Attorney Bob Macy addressed the jury. He stressed that 2 witnesses had positively identified Clifford Henry Bowen as the man they saw at the scene of the crime. There was no mistake, he said, and the jury had but one choice.
There can only be one verdict in this case. The evidence is overwhelming. It's beyond any reasonable doubt that man sitting right there just flat blew away 3 human beings.
State of Oklahoma is plaintiff versus Clifford Henry Bowen. CRF 80-3397. We, the jury and panel, and sworn in the above entitled cause, do upon our oaths find the defendant guilty of murder in the first degree, count 1. Guilty of murder in the first degree, count 2. Third verdict, same style. We, the jury and panel, and sworn in the above entitled cause, do upon our oaths find the defendant guilty of murder in the first degree, count 3. You may sit down. All 3. We, the jury and panel, and sworn in the above entitled cause, do upon our oaths, having heretofore found defendant Clifford Henry Bowen guilty of murder in the first degree, as to count 1 of the information concerning the death of Raymond Peters, fix his punishment as to this count at death. Fix his punishment
As
to this
Clifford
count
Henry
at
Bowen
death.
faced the
Signed,
jury
Jesse
who sentenced him to
Thomas.
death, he stood like a rock. He did
Count
not
3.
speak. The jury was silent as Judge Nafee read the 3 death sentences, 1 for each count of first-degree murder. Bowen had nothing to say to reporters as he was taken from the courtroom. He said earlier he did not want to jeopardize his appeal. Defense attorney Raymond Berger was disgusted with the verdict. He claims the jury was not sure of Bowen's guilt and should not have sentenced him to death.
I, of course, think the jury made a mistake in the first stage, and they didn't correct it and couldn't correct it in the second stage. I think that the time it took them to arrive at a punishment was indicative of the fact that they weren't sure in the first stage.
But District Attorney Bob Macy says justice was done.
The jury found that Clifford Henry Bowen was the man that actually pulled the trigger and killed 3 human beings, 2 of them merely because they happened to be there and be in his way.
We're offering $25,000 reward for the information leading to the apprehension and conviction of the person who shot those 3 people out the guest house and motel. It's the only way we're going to solve the crime, because obviously the police are not going to be looking for anybody.
The jurors may still have questions in their mind tonight, wondering if Clifford Henry Bowen really did pull the trigger on July the 6th and send 3 men to their death. But the verdict is history, an eye for an eye, death for Henry Bowen.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
The jury deliberated for more than 6 hours before they found Clifford Henry Bowen guilty on all 3 counts of first-degree murder. As Bowen's wife tried to comfort him in the courtroom, defense attorney Raymond Berger fumed in the hall.
I don't believe there's 12 other people in the world that would convict this client of mine in this case. I just happened to pick 12 people that didn't know what they were doing.
But District Attorney Bob Macy says justice was done.
The jury found that Clifford Henry Bowen was the man that actually pulled the trigger and killed 3 human beings, 2 of them merely because they happened to be there and be in his way.
Then Clifford Henry Bowen took his first steps toward death row, where he'll remain until his case is appealed. Sue Lauer, Action 4.
The price of walking around the University of Oklahoma campus is going to be higher next year. The price is going up for the same reason everything else is going up. Inflation.
What are you doing this for?
It's costing more for the university to provide the same services to students. This year, a single student living in OU housing paid close to $3,400. Next year, it will be between $400 and $500 more. In addition, proposed Reagan administration cuts in various student loan programs could mean some people won't have enough money for an education.
I think for the first time since I've been director here, which is 15 years, that we may be in a position where there will be students with financial need and we won't be able to fund them, and that'll be a first.
No one knows yet how many students will be pushed out by the new administration's cuts. Some estimate as high as 30% of those now receiving federal aid. Colleges as a whole are suffering right now from a shortage of students. Private schools are feeling the pinch, and some, as costs go up, will have to close down. Will increasing costs mean fewer students at OU? Well, people who should know say probably not. As the more expensive private institutions close, the students will have to go somewhere, and they'll probably go to the less expensive state schools. Ted Brown, Action 4 on the OU campus.
Installing a phone has been cheaper for customers than it really should be, and so the Federal Communications Commission is trying to make it possible for the phone companies to charge rates without any reduced fee for installation. Because the current installation fee is lower than the going rate, one phone company official says other users must cover costs.
We are not recovering from the customer at the time the installation is made enough to cover those costs, okay? All right, so that means that the cost for that installation then has to be recovered from the general ratepayer body.
So phone customers, which includes most of us, should brace yourself for a sizable increase when it comes to installation charges. Our phone company officials say they, like everyone else, have been hit by inflation. But the Corporation Commission, like the FCC, must first agree that an increase is valid. Ed Stewart, Action 4.
A couple of years ago, I was staying in the Rocky Mountains and I needed to get to Denver. Well, a friend that was with me suggested that we take a highway that the map showed was a lot quicker than backtracking to the interstate. What the map didn't show was about a quarter of the way to Denver, the highway became a one-lane dirt road winding through the mountains. Well, the movie Backroads, starring Sally Fields and Tommy Lee Jones, is a lot like that. The scenery is nice, but if it's going anyplace, it certainly takes its time about it. This isn't what most people think about when they think of Sally Fields. It's not the flying nun, and it's not Smoking the Bandit. Fields plays an Atlanta prostitute. Jones plays an Atlanta boxer who takes dives. They wind up together, and they wind up having to get out of Atlanta. Neither of them has much money, so they hit the back roads to Los Angeles. Fields plays with all the enthusiasm that made her great in Smokey and the Bandits. Then she adds the emotion that we saw in Norma Ray. Jones plays big on a disarmingly dry wit. This is a pleasant film, but it's an equally predictable one. It's just like a multitude of other films that have been made over the years, and there's not much that distinguishes it from the crowd. If you're looking for just another pleasant film, Backroads is probably a good bet. But if you're looking for something different, try Another Highway. For Action 4, I'm Charles Schnitzer.
The Oklahoma Passenger Rail Association met today and listened to a National Rail spokesman. Barry Williams of the National Association of Railroad Passengers told the group that current federal budget cutting will only hurt existing rail service. And as far as Amtrak returning to the Sooner State, Williams says we won't get Amtrak back unless everybody else does.
If we lose everything west of Washington, D.C., October 1st, which is basically the plan, I don't think you'll ever see passenger trains in the state of Oklahoma again.
Williams says that the only real hope for new passenger trains is with state and local governments. And next week, the state legislature is scheduled to discuss such a measure. In downtown Oklahoma City, George Ryan, Action 4.
Carrie's mother, Vicki Lynn West, was the first witness for the prosecution. She testified that Carrie was a responsible child, prompt and never late. That's why her mother became so worried when Carrie did not return from buying a newspaper just around the corner. After the prosecution and defense asked Mrs. West to describe Carrie's actions just before her disappearance, Carrie's stepfather, Edwin West, took the stand. He says that he went looking for Carrie and that he was so worried when he saw no sign of her on the Guthrie streets that he even began looking for her in trash cans because he was afraid something was wrong. Defense attorney F.E. McElhaney jumped on the answer. He said West must have known that Carrie was dead. He then asked stepfather West if he had killed Carrie Kendall. "Get away from me," West exclaimed, his eyes wide in amazement. "I didn't kill her." Throughout the entire proceeding, Roger Dale Hayes sat quietly. He was doodling with pencil and paper.
Yep, door's open. Joe, you got anything to say? What do you have to say, Joe?
Yeah, like I say, it's the communist federal government's trying to frame us.
Close it out. We'll take care of it. We got it. Close the door.
The brother and sister-in-law's testimony conflict as to who that other man might be. In fact, testimony throughout the entire day conflicted several times. Many family members called to establish Hayes' whereabouts on the night of the murder have been in and out of mental institutions, and it's very difficult for the jury to determine just what to believe. Early morning testimony related to Roger Dale Hayes' taped confession in which Hayes admitted he raped and murdered Carrie Kendall. OSBI agent Greg Shields testified that Hayes gave 3 other statements after his arrest. The first implicated his brother Donald and his sister-in-law as the ones who actually did the killing. In the second statement, Hayes claimed that his brother-in-law Carl Massey and another brother Otis did it. And in the third statement, Hayes again implicated his brother Donald. When Roger Dale Hayes was advised of the inconsistencies in these statements, Hayes was asked again to tell the truth. He then admitted to the homicide and said all he wanted to do was go back to the penitentiary with his friends. Defense attorney F.E. McElhenney is trying to show that those inconsistencies in Hayes' different confession just support what he's been trying to show all along, that Hayes has a tendency to confess to just about anything, and that he actually had nothing to do with the murders. But that decision is up to the jury. Sue Lauer, Action 4 at the Logan County Courthouse. Hayes testified that he was a homosexual and that he had been a homosexual since he was 9 years old. He also says he has no desire for women or girls. When District Attorney James Langley asked why he had confessed earlier to the murder and rape of Carrie Kendall, Hayes replied that the police were putting down my family and I just couldn't take it. I told them what they wanted to hear. A psychologist then testified that Hayes is a pathological liar, but not smart enough to keep his story straight unless he actually experienced the events. The jury returned to the courtroom with a verdict about 11:30 last night. It took them 7 hours to make a decision. Roger Dale Hayes showed no emotion as Judge Ray Lee Hall pronounced judgment.
State of Oklahoma versus Roger Dale Hayes, CRF 8160. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn to try the issues in the above entitled cause, do upon our oaths find the defendant Roger Dale Hayes guilty of the offense of murder in the first degree.
Court will reconvene at 8:30 this morning, and the jury will enter the second stage of deliberations to determine the punishment for now convicted murderer Roger Dale Hayes. Sue Lauer, Action 4.
But now present to you Dr. Oral Roberts.
Dr. Oral Roberts, a man who has made himself scarce to the press, was totally available today. Suburban newspaper editors from across the country and Canada had gathered at the Lincoln Plaza to hear Roberts as a guest speaker. Since he was speaking to the press, he decided to talk about world events, saying tragedies in Guyana and Iran were caused by people trying to be God. He said everyone is out to change things, but that the press must be particularly careful.
the press is trying to find itself, because it represents two things. It represents, first of all, the right to know. But the second thing you represent is the curiosity of the people. And that leads you into sensationalism. It makes you believe a false premise that you can't sell your newspapers. You won't have readers unless your headlines are certain ways.
Much as he criticized the press for sometimes sensationalizing, Dr. Roberts did say that the press cannot destroy anyone who has substance, and that he has probably been hit harder than anyone else in this country, and he survived. Bella Shaw, Action 4 at the Lincoln Plaza.
A stand.
But if the buildings along these highways aren't condemned and torn down by the city or the state, I appreciate what the media has done for this institution. If you'd had over 100 cars broken into in your parking lot, people hit in the head in your parking lot, you had 8 or 9 vacant buildings adjacent to you, had your highways moved, had housing problems, had zoning regulations that were without teeth. And these are the problems we're faced with. We're looking at the future of an institution that brings over 300,000 people here.
You may think that Scottish dancing is as foreign to children in Oklahoma as the two-step is to children in Scotland. But today, 90 dancers put on their lace-up slippers, their plaid kilts and socks, and joined a competition for traditional Scottish dancing. The Oklahoma Scottish Dancing Association is very active, and some of these dancers travel all over the country to compete. The contestants are judged for precision in their routines. They hop and skip to the whining sound of a bagpipe. But there is as much ceremony to the dancing as there is competition. The dances date back in Scottish history to a time when warriors danced for luck before they headed to the battlefield. These children realize that there is a history lesson in their art, but they like Scottish dancing and the competition because it's just plain fun. Jane Boone, Action 4 in Northwest Oklahoma City.
Okay.
When Rita Silk-Nauni was convicted of killing an Oklahoma City airport security guard, it sent shockwaves through the Indian community. Supporters vowed to see her conviction overturned. They felt she was tried unfairly and was discriminated against because of her Indian heritage. The appeal process is presently centered around legal transcripts like this one. Nauni attorney Doug Parr says a complete set of preliminary hearing and trial transcripts is needed for that appeal. Judge Raymond Nafee recently ruled Nauni must pay for her own transcripts up to $6,000. Even though thousands of dollars have been raised for Nauni's defense fund, Parr says Nauni is penniless.
The issue is right now, when you have a poor person who's appealing a criminal conviction, do they have the same rights as a person who has plenty of money at their disposal? The court here in Oklahoma County seems to be taking the position that if you're a poor person, you don't have the same rights as a person who has plenty of money. A person who has plenty of money can post bail, hire a lawyer to do the appeal, pay for the transcripts, and they can exercise their right to appeal a conviction. A poor person, the court seems to be saying, if they have any money at all, they have to pay for the transcripts. That means if they have a choice between paying for the transcripts and doing their appeal, and getting out of jail on bond, they can only choose one. If they decide to get out of jail on bond, then they can't appeal their case because they don't have money to pay for the appeal.
Parr says he'll take that appeal on the transcript issue to the State Court of Criminal Appeals this week. He should have an answer to that question by the end of next month. In the meantime, Rita Silk-Nauni is free, and her freedom is raising questions about some of the state's bonding procedures. Action Force Ted Brown takes a look at that issue.
This is a copy of the first audit of the entire state government in Oklahoma. And now Oklahoma is one of the first states in the nation to present such an audit. It tells us that the different state agencies and departments are in good shape financially, with one exception, and that has State Auditor and Inspector Tom Daxon worried.
I personally was very concerned at the situation that we found in our pension plans. I am concerned that we may have promised or be promising right now pensions to people, particularly firemen, policemen, and teachers, that we may have some difficulty paying. Our unfunded pension liabilities, vested liabilities, exceeded $1 billion.
It really isn't new that the retirement systems for these groups are in trouble. The teachers' retirement system is perhaps in less jeopardy than that of police and firemen. Lawmakers are working this year to give them more money through the gross production tax. And much to the opposition of some teachers, lawmakers may have to funnel some of that money to bail out the ailing retirement funds for firemen and policemen. Daxon says other states are finding themselves in the same position, a position that is not very good when you consider $1 billion may be at stake in retirement funds. Bella Shaw, Action 4 at the state capitol.
It represents an increase of only about 29 cents a day for each residential customer, and that's our average customer who uses about 1,000 kilowatt hours a month. That would be about a $40 a month bill would go up about 29 cents a day. And this is about a 14% overall increase and is almost exactly the same as the 13.5% rate of inflation that we experienced in 1980.